I have a very high level of privilege because I'm a white female from a middle-class family. I know that there's people, especially males, white males, who are more privileged than me, but still I know I'm on the higher end of it because there's also many minorities who have a lot less than I do.
I have the privilege of being able to use my 2 legs and my arms. I have the privilege of being able to attend this university. I have the privilege of being able to come to the United States because I was born in the Dominican Republic. And I also have the privilege of being able to have a girlfriend in this beautiful country. So.
Well, I know a lot of people say I'll have white privilege because, well, I'm white, and male privilege because I'm male, obviously. However, I don't think that these privileges have got me to where I am right now, sitting here in this college, getting a degree, doing what I can because I worked for my life, how I got here. If I were to say that my white privilege, I guess people would look at maybe acceptance to this college, like, oh, you're white, you get accepted more frequently being a white person. However, I don't see it like that. I do see people that are not white here as well, so clearly this college accepts people of all colors. I worked in high school to get to where I was, to get a good enough GPA, ACT score, all that to get here and be accepted, to increase my chances of accepted here and other places. So my white privilege, or my privileges in general, I think it's just stuff that I've worked for.
From my knowledge of the subject, I think white privilege is more or less being able to fit into the majority of a crowd that could help you advance further in a career or in a specific aspect.
Basically, I can walk into a place without being looked at because of my skin color. I won't get judged at a job interview because of that. Most of the time, people won't make any assumptions or stereotypes about me because of my skin color. Generally, people can talk to me as if I'm Christian or Catholic.
It's a benefit that people who are Caucasian have, where they're not discriminated against because of their race, where they're not lacked an opportunity because of their race.
I think it strives to be. However, I feel like because of where we are situated and basically our background, we are not as diverse as maybe we would like to be. However, I do see that CSBSJU strives very hard to be diverse.
It's kind of diverse, but not compared to many other schools, including like the University of Minnesota, and even my high school was way more diverse than CSBSJU, but I know that they're trying to combat that.
As I said, we did a Theo project on this for my theology class. We looked into the diversity here on this campus. It's not as diverse, obviously, as like a university in San Antonio or California or New York or even the U of M. However, we do think that, well, my group in my Theo presentation, we do think CSBSJU is more diverse than other liberal arts colleges in Minnesota.
No, because I'm a white European female.
Yes, all the time. When some residents have an assignment to do that has to do with race, they come to me. My friends who have a project to do in terms of race, they come to me. When they have questions that have to do with race, come to me and kind of put in the spotlight in that aspect.
No, not really, besides, well, this interview.
Right now, I'm being picked out right now. Other than that, I think it's mostly just for educational purposes. Right now, no, I can definitely see it in the future being called out on being a white male, especially because I'm looking to go into law enforcement. Especially right now with all that nonsense going on, I can definitely see it happening later on in the future.
No, I'm not.
Yes, actually. Um, I am gender fluid, and so when I wear clothing that is generally considered, like, society considers masculine, when I walk in, people think that I've walked into the wrong bathroom because I'm a guy, or one time here, I was in the bathroom washing my hands, and a girl walked in and clearly out loud said, "Am I in the wrong bathroom?" Went outside and checked the sign to make sure she was in the right one. And a lot of adults, like older adults, have judged me based on what I look like.
No. I mean, unless it's in an area where there aren't a lot of Hispanics, I guess I feel a little uncomfortable. That's sort of something that I carry with me all the time. It's just a matter of when I look in the mirror and I see other people who tend to look the same, it's very obvious, at least to myself, that I look very different.
No, not at all.
So I learned a lot about privilege after doing this interview, which is what I wanted to focus on because it was my favorite unit in class. When it came to things I had no clue about, it was privilege, feminism, wage gap, just gender norms and what was to be expected of people. I knew a little bit about like the LGBT community, but didn't really know like terms or how to go about things or preferences. So I'm really glad that you had Liam there to help us learn, because that was such a great experience to have that one-on-one with him. But also, I was scared of the word feminist until that class. I am now proud to talk about me being a feminist. And going straight into privilege now, holy crap, because that was my favorite part, and I think I was probably the only white person who was not uncomfortable. I was so eager to learn, but then again, I was in the back of the privilege line. I was the only white person in the back of the privilege line. And so going to a school like St. Ben's and St. John's, where I've talked to people of minority groups where they say, I assume that all white people are rich because they can afford to go here. Affirmative action is a thing, and which is really unfortunate, but people are considered because of their race to make things more diverse, because St. Ben and St. John's lacks a lot of diversity. There is a good chunk of people from all over the world that I think we are more diverse than other private schools in Minnesota, but I mean, there's still a lot of work to do to make this a full, functioning, diverse campus where people can reflect their ideals and their cultures without people looking at it weird. And so when it comes to privilege, I have made a lot of friends, and even friends in that class, who, with the acknowledgement of my white privilege, was able to talk and to learn more about them and their cultures or how they do things, which I love learning about people. And I think this class was really good for me because I learned a lot more about myself and not just other people, but how I affect those people. And so during this interview, I learned a lot about myself. And a thing that really stood out to me is that there's so many ways to see privilege, that with the class we just kind of focus on the heterosexual, the male, and the white privilege, but there's privileges of being able to see, to hear, to walk, to have a roof over our head, which we talked a little bit about, but it's just something I just kind of like skimmed over. And knowing some people who haven't even taken a gender class or have experienced certain things and are thankful and recognize that without even having to be taught that was pretty deep. With me not knowing anything about privilege, this class has been very, very powerful to me, and I am very thankful for it. And I think the only thing that it should have been different would be that people should have focused a lot more on the white privilege and privilege in general, because I was so thankful for that, but I feel like not a lot of other people were. But please keep that in the class, because this was my big focus on things, and learning about how the more privileged the person is, it seems like the least likely they are to accept it. I noticed that in my interviews that people who had a lot of privilege kind of came off more harsh and rude for having that privilege be kind of like announced at them. So I was very surprised at some of the people I talked to, and if anything, this class has taught me to be very passionate for who I am and to recognize my privileges and lack of privileges, and hopefully I can change other people's opinions on recognizing their own privilege and to be accepting of it rather than to be violent of other people asking about it or telling them straight out that you have privilege, that you shouldn't have a violent response to that. And so thank you so much for letting me do this project, because I learned even more than I already did, which is I learned a lot. And I also learned a lot about other people and myself. And I know I'm definitely going to go about life in a different way, because I already have with the friendships I've made and how I go about things with my residents. And I think St. Ben, St. John's, the students here do recognize some privilege, but also there's a lot of work to be done. And hopefully I can be a person who can affect a little bit of that. So thank you again. I loved our class. I loved everything that we learned, and I'm definitely going to be using it in my everyday life. And thank you for being such a wonderful teacher. I appreciate it. And hopefully you have a good year. And thank you again.